Ho, 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 it is time to sew for Christmas. What are you going to make to put into stockings? In this video, I have 13 ideas ready for you. Check the description below so you can see the timestamp for where each one starts. I have things for kids, things for travelers, things for dogs, things for dog lovers, things for anyone. So take a look and let me know in the comments which one you're going to sew first. Happy holidays and happy sewing. If your lip balm knows how to hide in your purse, as well as a dog that doesn't want to go to the vet, then you need to watch this tutorial and learn how easy it is to make a cute lip balm holder. These are so convenient, and when you use the Key Fob hardware, you can attach your key to it too. You can hook it in your purse, hook it onto your water bottle, anything with a hook. But before we get started, my name is Tara Reed. I am an artist and fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs. Be sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you click that little bell so YouTube knows that you want to know when I post new videos, which is about weekly. So let's dive into this and get our lip balm under control. Let's dive into how easy it is to make a lip balm holder with fabric interfacing and a 1-inch key fob. What you're going to need to start is a 15-inch by 2 1/4 inch strip of fabric, and also the same size fusible interfacing. And I am using the 911 fusible featherweight interfacing from Pellon. Then a pen or a heat resistant pen. You can use a regular one if you need to. Your key fob hardware. I highly recommend getting the pliers. It makes it much easier, but if you need to, you can use a hammer to close that if you don't want to invest in this. But key fob holders are one of my favorite things, so I recommend you invest in it. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the interfacing on the wrong side of our fabric. And the interfacing, you know which side is which, because one side you can see, I don't know if you can see the little bumps. That is the part that fuses or melts to your fabric. So that part needs to be down, and then it's smooth on the other side. If you do it backwards, you're going to put a bunch of glue gunk on your iron. Not the best. So you're going to put it down like this and line those up. And then, because every once in a while you make a mistake and you do it backwards, right? Tell me I'm not the only one. You can also use a pressing cloth, which you can buy these that are specifically pressing cloths. It's just a thin piece of cotton. I like it because you can see through it often. And you can put that over top. So if for some reason some of the fusible material gets between the fabric and your iron, it's going to go onto this pressing cloth and not onto your iron. So I'm going to get that done and then show you what to do next. Now I have the interfacing ironed onto the back side of the fabric, and that's just going to give us a little bit more stability with our fabric and our little holder when we're done. Now we're going to fold it in half and match these ends. Fold that down and either put a pin in it to make sure this part doesn't slide while we do the next part, or I sometimes just do a clip at the bottom, just depending on what I have. We're going to line this up. So see, each of these thicker lines, that's 1 inch. So we want to center this fabric on a 1-inch increment. And because we did 2 1/4, it's going to be just shy of each of these little dotted lines. Okay, so there's our 1 inch. Now I'm going to make a mark 1/4 inch to each side of that 1 inch, because we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. What we're trying to do right now is to figure out the angle to cut this so that the tip is the same width as your 1-inch key fob hardware. We could leave it out and it could just go like that, but I just think it looks more finished this way, and it doesn't take a lot more work. So we make a mark and then about 3/4 of an inch down on each side. Then you're just going to draw a little line, make sure it stays together, and you're just going to cut. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down each of the angle and each of the long sides. Leave this end open for turning using a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to turn this right side out, and we're going to use this cute little flamingo turning tool to make sure the angle there and the points are out. All right, now I got it most of the way out. Now I'm just going to gently run this along that seam at the top, so we get that 1 inch part out. And I just kind of roll the seams to make sure it's all out nicely. Flatten it as much as I can with my fingers. Then we're just going to iron that flat. Now I'm just going to take it back to the sewing machine and either do a quick zigzag, or you can just do a straight stitch right close to that. It's going to be inside. So this part right here is going to be deep in here. So if you want to just do a straight stitch, you can. And that's what I'm going to do, and I'll be right back. So I just did a straight stitch there because it's going to stop that from fraying. It's going to be inside, and I did not feel like changing my presser foot. Now, this part is really important if you have directional fabric, which I do. You can tell more from a bigger piece. See, most of the fruit looks good this way, and it looks upside down this way. So you want to make sure it doesn't look upside down when you're done your holder. You want these grapes going the direction that it hangs, if that's what ends up on here. So you're going to do it like this, and look, these are backwards. So we're going to turn it over this way. So this is going to be the front. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this up an inch. Just use this handy dandy little ruler. Fold that up an inch. Press that. So we're sewing a 1/4 inch from this folded edge, but I'm going to turn it over because the underside when you do the knot and everything sometimes looks a little bit worse. So we're going to make sure this looks really good from the top because this will be the side that we see. And then we're going to turn it back so that the raw edge is up, and this is going to be the front because the fruit is right side up. Now we're going to turn it up about 2.5 inches. But before I sew that, I always check, grab your favorite lip balm, shout out to Burt's Bees. So I always check to make sure that when it goes in, it's going to stick out a little bit so that it's easy to grab in and out of this holder. I'm just going to clip both sides. Now, one thing to be careful of is sometimes this raw edge like sticks out on the corner. So just make sure you tuck that in as you sew around. I am using a Janome sewing machine with a 1/4 inch walking foot, and I find it works a lot better than the traditional foot, even if it's a walking foot, because this 1/4 inch has like one walker that's right in the center, whereas the other one has it on both sides and it only grabs one side of the fabric when you're sewing really close. So if you have that option, make sure you use it. Now we're just going to sew all around here about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and you're going to double back where this meets just so it's more secure, because that's going to be the area that gets the most use, putting your lip balm in and out. I don't know if you can see this. I'm seeing a little bit of that edge, so I'm just going to tuck that under with my scissors before I sew over that. All that's left is to go add the key fob. The last step is to attach our hardware, which is basically a piece of metal, and it's got these little, I don't know, triangles that are going to dig into and attach to the fabric to keep that nice and secure. And it comes with a key ring. And there's a link below the video to find them on Amazon if you are on my YouTube channel or my website. So it's going to line up like that. So you can either do it like that and put it in to the pliers. I highly recommend the pliers. If you don't have any, what you're going to do is you're going to line this up, put a little piece of fabric over there and gently hammer it. Put fabric on there so that you don't dent or scratch the metal, so that it'll still look good. But I love key fobs, definitely worth the pliers. And this is what I've learned over the years of doing key fobs. The easiest way to do it is to set your hardware in your key fob first, and then gently close it so it'll hold, right? So it holds there. Then take whatever you're putting into it and put it in and double check on both sides to make sure it's lined up with the top so it looks nice and professional. And then you simply squeeze. And that's it. It is done. It is ready for your lip balm. I think I have a new project obsession. These little mini wallets, they're perfect for a gift card, for carrying your credit card, a couple dollars. You can hook them onto a lanyard with the D-ring, or you can put a lobster clasp and you can hook it onto your purse, carry little things around. This would be a fun way to make a functional gift bag for a gift card for the holidays, for teacher appreciation. They'd be cute little stocking stuffers. I have so many ideas of what to do with these. You can make them with your fabric scraps, so let me show you how easy these are to whip up, and maybe you too will get obsessed with them. Let's look at the supplies you need to make these cute little card holders, perfect for gift cards or credit cards. You didn't think I was going to show you my credit card, did you? This is a great project for fabric scraps, and I love to use cam snaps with them. So what you need are 2 pieces of fabric, one for the outside and one for the inside. I'm going to show you some tricks about using directional fabric to either be on the inside like this one, or to be on the outside so that everything is right side up. Then you'll need a piece of medium weight interfacing. And as I always say, the best interfacing or the best material is the one you have around your sewing room. I used the Pellon Easy Shaper Interfacing ES114 for this. You could use lots of different kinds. As long as it says medium weight, you will be good to go. Then adding a clip, either a clip like this or just a plain D-ring to the side is optional. But if you do want to do it, you just need 1 piece of fabric, 3 inches by 2 inches. You can either have it match the exterior or be the opposite of the exterior. And I will show you examples of how those choices vary. Then clips and or pins, your basic sewing stuff, rotary cutter, mat, rulers. I'm a huge fan of pinking shears for clipping curves. You know I love my quilter's clapper if you've watched many of my videos. You can get the free templates. The link will be in the description below this video. And I'm going to be using cam snaps because I love all the colors they come in and how just changing the color of the snap can change the look of your mini wallet. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is decide which fabric we want to be the outside and the inside. Since I did this one with the sunflowers on the inside, this time we're going to do that on the outside. So this will be our lining, is we are going to put the fusible fleece onto the lining piece of fabric. The fusible side is usually a little bit shiny, or it might have some bumps depending on what product you're using. So make sure you have that down towards the wrong side of the fabric. And then you can either cut it the exact same size as this, or you can cut it a little bit smaller. So I do note that on this template. You might also notice that I did not cut the curves yet, and I will explain why in a minute. So I cut the interfacing a little bit smaller, so it's not going to be in the seam allowances, and that will be a little bit less bulk when sewing this together. You're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions, and then I always like to use a pressing cloth, which is basically a thin piece of cotton that you put over top. Then if you ever put your interfacing the wrong way, it's not going to adhere to your iron and possibly ruin your iron. It'll just stick to this pressing cloth. So we have the interfacing on our lining. I am going to put a D-ring on this bag. So you could do a D-ring, like if you're going to put it on a lanyard that has a clasp like this, you would just hook it like that. Or if you think you're going to hook it on something that has a D-ring or just a ring like on your purse, you might want to use a clasp like this. Either one, you can use the same size fabric. And I'm going to do fabric that matches the exterior. So for this one, it's opposite. And so this time I'm going to show you how it looks when you do the same. Now this is the most important part, but you want to have it this way. So the shorter end is facing you and the longer end is on the side. And then you're going to fold and press that in half. If you do it the opposite way, it's going to be too long and skinny. I did put a note on the free template where the first fold line is, because sometimes I do it this way not when I'm not thinking. So I just wanted to remind everyone, you want to fold here first. Then we're going to open that up. And this is where I like to use my clapper, my piece of wood that absorbs heat and helps this stay pressed nicely. Now I'm going to fold each of the raw edges into that first fold, and I'm going to press. But make sure you keep your iron only on this side. Don't get rid of that first seam. And then I'm just going to press that with the clapper, and then I'm going to bring in the other side. And then I'm going to fold it in half again. So this is the original fold line.
And this is basically making our fabric that we're going to put our hook on, and it is getting those raw edges on the inside. You're just going to sew down each side of this tab to finish that. You don't have to worry about the ends because that will be inside the mini wallet. Now we have our lining and the front. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the template and I'm going to put it on top of the lining. And instead of cutting these curves now, I'm just going to draw the curves on the corners, because you can just as easily sew from a line than from a cut edge. And this is just going to save us one extra cutting because we're going to have to clip this curve when we're done. Now you'll notice if we're using directional fabric for the lining, the print needs to be going this way. This is pretty much non-directional, so it doesn't matter. This, however, matters a lot. And the reason that this one has the flowers on the inside is because I forgot to pay attention to the direction of the fabric. But this time I'm going to do it so that this can be on the outside. So when you're looking at the free templates that you can get, it's going to show you the exterior fabric needs to be this way. It feels weird to have it upside down when you're putting it together, but this is how it's going to be right side up when you fold that wallet together. I also made a placement template, and this is more for how to fold it once it's sewn together. But just look at the directions. You're going to put your D-ring clasp, and we're going to put a regular D-ring. So you put that through and you fold it in half. And you're going to put it 4 inches up from the bottom of the fabric before it is sewn together. So I'm just going to line this up on my grid. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the bottom of the fabric is going to be here. Now, you can choose which side you want this to be on. So if you want it to be on the left, you're going to pin this on the right-hand side. And if you want it to be on the right-hand side, you're going to pin it to the left-hand side. So let's do one that's on the right-hand side because somehow I got every other one on the left. I am going to clip that. You can either just clip it, or if you want to, you can baste that on before doing the rest. But to save time, I'm just going to clip it. We're going to put these together right sides together. And make sure, if you have directional fabric, it's facing down, away from the curve for the exterior. And I like to first do 2 pins towards the middle at the top and the bottom. I just want to keep it away from the seam allowance and where my presser foot is going to be, just so it stops it from shifting. Then I just like to use clips. Clip the top and then 2 on each side. One being this one, I'm just going to take that off and add that top layer. Now we're going to take it back to the sewing machine. Moving right along, we are going to sew around the 2 long edges and the curved top with a 1/4 inch seam. We're not going to sew the bottom at all. Make sure you go forward and back at the beginning and the end. I also like to use a smaller stitch than normal, a 2.0 to 2.2. That is going to help the curves be more rounded than if you use a longer stitch length. And then just sew slowly on the curve and try and move it as much as you can. If you're getting off of the 1/4 inch, you can always raise your presser foot and pivot it a little bit. Now that we have sewn along the 2 sides and the curve, I'm going to take these pins out. And then you need to clip the curves. Now, if you have pinking shears, and I highly recommend you get pinking shears because it's a lot faster, you can just cut right along the edge, close to the stitching, but make sure you don't cut any of the stitching. If you don't have pinking shears, you can do it with regular scissors, and I would recommend small ones. And then you're just going to do little snips along that edge. And then I would also make it cut it a little bit closer. Because basically what you're doing is you're giving the fabric a little bit of give so that when you turn it right side out, it can do that curve nicely. And when I'm using pinking shears, I always work over top of a trash can because it makes a bunch of fuzz that I don't feel like cleaning up. So that is clipped. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. Now, sometimes you'll see tutorials where people will say to just leave 2 to 3 inches of this bottom open. But when I am doing projects that have a pretty small opening like this, I just leave the whole bottom open because it makes it easier to turn and get this edge out. And I feel like I get a more consistent and straight edge when I turn the whole thing. So I've done this with my fingers first, and then I'm going to take this turning tool and I'm just going to very gently run it along the curve. You don't want it to push through and rip your stitching. Now we're going to get our ironing board back. So you want to have whichever side is going to be the exterior up when you do your pressing, so that if you want to get it as perfect as possible so that you're not seeing the other fabric on either side. But if you're seeing a teeny tiny bit on one side versus the other, you want it to show on the lining side rather than the exterior side. So just take your time and kind of push with your fingers to get this out, and then you're just going to press so that this is nice and flat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and I'm going to start on the seam section. I'm going to fold each seam down 1/4 inch. And once you get that folded down, the rest pretty much falls in place. And if it ends up being a teeny bit more than 1/4 inch, that's totally fine. Just going to press that. Do that to get it nice and pressed. Now we want to sew close to the edge to close this opening. And that is going to be the top of our pocket. Because this is getting a little bit thick and we want to start really close to the end, sometimes your sewing machine has a hard time getting going. So what I use is called a leader fabric. So this is basically just folded over a few layers of fabric. So I'm going to put it right behind. I'm going to bump it up like that. I'm going to have it moved over from my wallet so that it is going to totally cover those feed dogs. This is going to help your sewing machine catch and move this fabric more easily. Then I am also going to do the old pull up the bobbin thread trick, where I put the needle down while holding this thread, pull it to grab that bobbin thread, put them both under, and then I'm going to knot. My machine has an automatic knotter. If yours doesn't, you're just going to go forward a few stitches and then back while holding that thread. That is going to make it so you don't get a bird's nest in your sewing. Then we're just going to sew straight across and then either knot or go back and forth to catch your threads. Moving right along, now it is time to fold your wallet. Now I want to show you how this directional fabric is going to work. So we wanted this to be on the outside, and you'll notice it looks upside down now. But when we turn it over and have the lining side up and we fold this up, and then we fold this down, everything is going to be right side up. It will be upside down on the back, but it's going to be right side up on the front. You're going to mark about 2 3/4 inches up the side. Then I'm going to place my ruler here and I'm going to fold this up. Because I didn't do that totally straight, it's going to be fine. You just want to make sure that these edges are lined up perfectly. Now we are just going to press this bottom part. And now back to the sewing machine. I don't know what is wrong with me today. I keep forgetting to hit record. I think I do, but I don't. So let me just tell you what I did. We're sewing the pocket up. We're going to start on one end and then sew all the way around the curve and down, doubling back where the pocket overlaps for added security. And just sew slowly on these corners so that you get a nice curve. So you'll see that stitched all the way around the loop. So up the side, down the other side. Now we're going to fold that flap down and I'm just going to press top. And then it is going to be time to add our snap. So as I mentioned, I love these cam snaps. They're a family-owned business, so I like supporting that. And they come in lots of colors. And this is just the standard number 20. I got like a variety pack, so I have different colors to choose from. So let's take a look at our options. We could do brown, that kind of pulls from the sunflower color and gives a real fall feel. Or the gold, also pretty with the sunflower. Not a huge fan of that green. It's way too bright with the fabric, so we're going to say no to that. And then the other option that could be cute would be white. No, not in love with that either. I think I'm going to go with brown. Once you pick your color, you need 2 that are the pointy part. That's the outside. And then you need 1 male and 1 female piece. The male piece sticks out, the female piece goes in. Stop giggling. We're going to put the male piece here on the inside of the flap. So to get our placement correct, we're going to fold it in half. Make sure it's lined up down here as well as up here. Just kind of finger press that so you can see where that is. If you want to measure, you can. You want to go down about 1/2 inch. And then you're going to use the awl that comes with the set and make the hole in your fabric. And you're going to push the pin through, push that fabric down, and then you're going to put the male side on there and then put it in the tool and squeeze. To figure out exactly where the female section goes so that it snaps well, you're going to fold this down and you're going to press on that snap. That is going to make a slight indent of the male portion, this slight indented circle. And you're going to take the awl and you're going to push through the center. Make sure you're only going through this layer and not the whole wallet. Then the button side goes on the inside of your wallet, pokes through, and then you're going to put the female side. Now when you're doing this, make sure you get that flat part seated really evenly in the black. And this is pretty evenly under the white part. And then you're just going to squeeze. And now we have our snap. So let's look at a few that I have made. I absolutely love these. These could be great stocking stuffers, a great little extra for teachers, put a little gift card or a little note in there. And as you see, you can put the hooks or the D-rings on the left or the right. And these are all made with my Honeybees and Flowers Please fabric from Riley Blake Designs. You can see how choosing a different snap color makes a difference to how it looks. Also using the opposite, like using the lining fabric for the tab versus having the tab match, gives a little bit of a different look. So even though these are super simple and are basically made with 3 pieces of fabric, there's lots of ways to customize them to look however you want. I hope you love this idea. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more tutorials, and also be sure to check out my membership where you can get lots of tutorials like this with no ads at all. So go to sewwithtarareid.com if you want more information about that. If you keep tissues on you, would you rather carry this pack or this pack? I'm going to guess that if you sew, you're going to want the prettier one made out of fabric. And all it takes is 2 scraps of fabric to make this beautiful tissue holder with a cute little trim. So I'm going to show you how to do it, but there's one option that you have in making this. So these are made from the same size fabric. This one, I didn't make little box corners, so it sticks out a little bit more. This one, I added that boxed corner, so it's a little bit more finished and polished, but it does take a little bit more time. So if you're making a lot of them for stocking stuffers, teacher gifts, etc., and you just want to crank them out, I would go with this way, because if people don't see this, they're not going to know. Or if you just really want to add that extra touch, I'm going to show you how to do that too. Let's get started. The first thing we need are 2 pieces of fabric. They are both 5.5 inches high with a 1 inch difference in the width. 6.5 inches wide and 7.5 inches wide. The wider one is going to be the lining. So you need a little bit extra to do the lining and this super cute little trim. So just remember, whatever you want to be the main print of your tissue cover is the smaller piece. And then whatever you want to have on the inside and this trim accent piece is going to be the larger piece. Then we're simply going to line up one of these edges. We're going to sew straight down there. It's going to buckle a little bit because, again, they're not the same length. We're going to sew that other side as well. All right, once you have that sewn together, you'll see this part's straight. This has got a little loop, so it's almost like a little cave. We are going to turn it right side out. And I don't press the seams open. I just kind of make sure they kind of fold in the same direction all along the seam, usually towards the smaller fabric. And you're just going to get it flattened and kind of adjust it left and right so that these 2 sides are going to be even, because that is going to be the accent. We're basically making the opposite of this one. So this is going to be our main fabric we'll see, and this is going to be the lining. Once you get that done, you're just going to give it a little press. The next step is we are going to fold it so that they meet right in the center. And you can really eyeball that if you want to measure it. You can mark the center, but I have found that just folding these in, you can really get a good feel for it without that extra step. Then I just finger press this. I'm going to grab a pin and I'm going to pin each side just to make sure that it is staying. And now we're going to take that back to the sewing machine. Let's get these 2 seams sewn just with a straight stitch, 1/4 inch from the edge, and I'm going to double back where they meet because that is going to be your stress point for your tissue pack as you're putting full packs of tissues in and out of this holder. And now I'm just going to repeat on the other side. So I took my scissors and I trimmed that so there's not a bunch of threads. And now we are going to put it down and do a zigzag stitch. I have mine set at 4.4 wide and about a 1.5 stitch length because we're not doing applique, we're just edging this seam. Now, I'm also going to grab a little piece of fabric because sometimes when you want to start right on the edge and you have like a couple layers, sometimes it kind of gets stuck. So I have found that putting another piece of fabric, so I'm going to butt that right up next to it, and I'm going to put that under my foot so that those feed dogs have something to grab onto that isn't part of what we're doing, but it's going to help everything move a little bit more smoothly. I think they call it a guide fabric. There's some term for it, but I can't remember exactly what it is. Look right here, I'll look it up and I'll put it on the video. Let's do a little ziggy zaggy. That little piece of fabric worked great. You'll see it did not end up attached to the tissue at all. We have a beautiful zigzag that's going to help with any fraying. Just going to cut those threads off, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So this can be done. We can just turn it right side out, push those corners out, and we can have a great tissue cover. But I'm going to show you the next step if you want to make the boxed corners like the original one that I showed you. So to do this boxed corner, we are going to pull this fabric out and make a triangle here. And then I'm just going to take a ruler and I'm going to mark 3/8 of an inch, just draw a line, 3/8 of an inch from the point. And I'm going to sew on that, and I'm going to do that for all 4 corners. Make sure you switch back to a straight stitch to do these box corners. And on each side, just make sure you have this seam folding the same direction so that that lays nice and flat instead of having it go like that and then you have this twist in there. So you'll see this takes a little bit longer because you're having to fold, mark, and stitch each of these corners. But as I said, it does give a little bit more finished look to it. So for something a little fancier, like a wedding, I would definitely take the time. But if I decided I wanted to make like 40 of these, I would probably not take the time. So now I have one with the box pleats that I just showed you, and then I also did another one that is plain. So let's get some tissues into these. Now, if you're using them for yourself, I would recommend, how I like to do it, is I just take all of the tissues out of the plastic, and then I put them in the cover. But let me show you, there is a right and a wrong side to the pile of tissues. So this one has both sides are folded. So that's the bottom. You want to make sure the one where the tissue is going to pop up is on top when you put them in your holder. So then I just put the one side in. This does fit nice and snug. It seems like it might not fit at first, but once you get it in there and smooth it out, it's perfect. Then I get the other side in. Like I said, just kind of adjust that a teeny bit. And look at how great that looks. You're not seeing any of the plastic there. So again, this is what I do if I'm using them for myself. But if you're going to be giving these to somebody or selling them, I would just leave them in the plastic and put the plastic in. And then the same way, but just keeping the plastic on. So now we have that, and then the people can pull it out. But you'll see, you can kind of see that color in the UPC code. So I don't love it as much, but again, for others, you want to do that. So now tell me which you prefer. Are you team, let's get it done fast and just have these edges a little bit pointy? Or are you, nope, I wanted a little more professional look and I'm going to take the time to do those box corners. Drop me a comment and let me know because I'm very curious which team will win.
Are you ready for an easy and super practical project? Today, I'm going to show you how to make a padded eyeglass case in, gosh, like 10 or 15 minutes. I've done the testing. I've made just a few. Originally, I tried it with batting. That's what a lot of people seem to do. But I have decided I really, really like using this Flexi Foam from Pellon. It is so much more protective. You can really see here how much more protective that's going to be for your glasses. Now, fleece, fusible fleece, quilting fleece, it's going to be fine if you're using inexpensive glasses like readers from the Dollar Tree or inexpensive sunglasses, but I am of an age where I have multiple pairs of prescription glasses. I've got computer glasses, I've got my everyday progressives, which are on my face, and then I've got larger, also prescription sunglasses. So they need to be protected more than this. I also played with some sizes. These two are bigger than what I landed on. You can also, double check your glasses. But this one, this fits well, in and out, really easy. Also fits my sunglasses, which are bigger. So I'm definitely a woman that needs lots of these cases. I also love to have one in my purse at all times because when it's raining, and if you wear glasses, you're going to know what I'm talking about. When it's raining and you're going from the car to a store, your glasses get wet. It's so annoying. So I like having one of these in my purse. It's small. It's very lightweight. I can put my glasses in there, run through the raindrops, and then get my glasses back on so that I can see in the store or see to drive. So let's make these. And we're just going to make a really simple one. This has one fabric on the outside, one fabric on the inside. And this is from my June fabrics for the monthly placemat panels from Riley Blake Designs. And I thought this is perfect for sunglasses because if you're going berry picking, you're going to need your sunglasses. So you need basically three things. You need 2 pieces of fabric, and you're going to pay attention to the directionality. So top and bottom, you don't want this sewn this way so all your fruit is sideways on your glass case. So 2 pieces of fabric, 7.5-inch square. That is, to me, the best size. If you wear larger glasses, you can go wider. You probably won't need to go taller unless you want to put a big snap or something in the top, then maybe just increase that a little bit. If you are going to do something like this, just sew things together and then just trim it down to 7.5-inch square. Then on this foam, it is called Flexi Foam, and it is fusible on one side, and you can feel it. It's softer on the non-fusing side and a little bit, rougher, scratchier on the side that will fuse to your fabric. And this, you want to be 7.5 inches wide. Let me show you on this one, it'll be easier to see. So the same width as your fabric, but 7 inches high so that you have a 1/4 inch that is just fabric on the top and bottom. That is going to decrease the bulk down here at the bottom and also at the top where you're going to be top stitching and having your lining and fabric meet up. It's not a big deal on this seam, and it also helps you know which way to go and make sure that that foam does stay secure and where you want it to be. So first thing you do is, we're going to use this for the outside. I always put my foam on the outside fabric. So I'm going to turn that face down, and then I'm going to put the foam on top of it and get it centered. So we have about a 1/4 inch of fabric showing on the top and the bottom. Now, I don't like to press directly onto the foam, so you could either use a pressing fabric or I just flip it over. This is upside down, obviously. This is going to be the top of the case. And now I'm just going to go to the iron, follow the directions, and press that foam onto this piece of fabric. And then I will be right back to show you what we do next. Okay, now I have the foam fused onto the outer fabric, again, with about a 1/4 inch here and here. If it's not perfect, you're fine. It will work out, no problem. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put these fabrics right side together. Now, because they're square, you need to pay attention if your fabric's at all directional. We don't want to do it this way so that the inside's going sideways. We don't want our strawberries all upside down. You want to make sure everything is facing towards the top. So we're going to line those up. And then I'm just going to flip it over because I'm going to be sewing from this side. And then I like to use these fabric clips, and I like to put them on either side. I put one here because I'm going to start stitching up here. And then I usually put one at the bottom or like 2 here just to make sure this fabric isn't going to slide around. while we're sewing this. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam straight across here. Now I'm using a 1/4 inch presser foot, so a 1/4 inch is just going right along the edge of that foot. So I'm just going to sew, and I didn't get the foam lined up perfectly because normally it would be right along there, but it's going to be totally fine and it will work out no problem. So I'm just going to sew straight along here. All right, now I'm going to take it to the ironing board, and this is, remember the front where the foam is, and I'm just going to press it towards the lining. All right, so we have the lining and the outside sewn together. So this seam right here is going to be your top edge. And I've normally been putting my little tag on the inside about 1 inch down. You can see it's kind of hidden in there, but I have people that look for it, especially my family, when I give them things. Where's your tag? So if you want to put any kind of a tag made by me or your logo, your name, and you want to put it inside, you can do that. But I'm going to show you how to put it on the outside, just so I've shown it both ways. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to fold this in half. I start by matching the seam and clip that. And then I'm just lining up the straight away. These are all my technical terms, straight away. And when you sew it, you need to make sure, I always usually just stick my finger in here, you need to make sure that this fabric is not like off center or rumpled. You want to make sure that's nice and flat. That's where we're going to start. So to put my tag on the outside, so it's going to be on the outside, I'm just going to tuck it in wherever I want it. So if I want it at the bottom, I'm going to have it towards the top. So I'm going to put it right there. I'll just clip there so I know exactly where that tag is. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and you'll notice this is going to have, this is about 1/4 inch. It's going to go over the foam a teeny bit, which again, it's fine. We're just reducing bulk. I'm going to sew this way and down here, leaving this completely open for turning. And instead of just knotting at this end, I do like to double back because there's going to be a bit of strain on that as we flip this entire thing right side out. So let's go get that sewn. We are almost done, if you can believe it. Now I'm going to sew here to here with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm just going to clip the corner a little bit right there on that angle, but make sure you don't clip any of your stitching. And now we are just going to turn it right side out. Now, because this is such a long tube, basically, I often use a ruler to get the corners mostly turned, just really gently and slowly pushing along those seams to get that corner out, because it's a great length. Then I will go back in with a seam turner or point turner, that's what it's called. But you have to be very gentle with this, because if you push too hard, you're going to pop right through your seam and the edge of your fabric. So just go really slow and really gentle. So at this point, you don't want that coming out. I've had it happen. Let's see how that made that corner come out so much better. This one is just always going to be bulkier because it has the bulk from this side as well as the bottom. So, all right, so now we are almost done. Now we are just going to press this flat. Then you're going to turn under the raw edge of the lining about, I don't know, you've already done a 1/4 inch over here, so you can do a little bit more because it's not going to go as far down in there. So 3/8 to a 1/2 inch turned under. I'm just going to press that. Now I'm just going to top stitch the edge of the lining, and I don't worry about what color thread I have in here because you will never see the bottom of this lining again. Once your case is together, you really only see a little bit of the top of the lining. Now what we need to do is push the lining inside the case. And because the fabric is going against foam, sometimes it doesn't go in as smoothly as you would think it would. So we're going to use the ruler again. So I just take the ruler and I can feel how it is pushing the fabric, and just gently, so we're not ripping anything, just move it from side to side and you can tell when it's in there. Now we're just going to use our hands, table's in the way, just kind of pull this up so that the lining fabric and the outer fabric and that top seam are lined up. Like one isn't showing too much on either side. Then if you want to, you can take that back and press that. Oh my gosh, I feel like an x-ray technician moving my camera trying to get you an angle so you can see what I'm doing. Does anybody else ever feel like that? So now we're just going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from this edge just to keep everything nice and secure in place and look finished. You can just leave it like that if you prefer, but I like to do a little bit of top stitching. Sometimes I will match the thread to the lining, so I could make that blue, and then I always match the bobbin to the outside, but I'm just going to go for white. Now, when you get to this part where you're sewing over that side seam, it's a bit thicker, so you want to make sure you go nice and slow so you don't break your needle. And that's it. It's done. So let's go look at the few that we made. These are so much fun. You can combine two designs, the eyelashes, add wherever you're heading. Wake Me In is in the bundle, and then you can just use your own font. You can just use the eyelashes, Off Duty and the eyelashes. Add names with your own font to give as a gift, use for slumber parties. So many ways you can use these. A really important thing to remember when you're going to be using the fabric cutting mats with your Cricut or any cutting machine that does fabric is to really get your fabric down nice and secure and nice and flat. If you just go like that, sometimes it will bubble. So you can see how it's rimpling. That's my own word. So you want to make sure that you get it nice and smooth, no wrinkles, and really secure to your mat. Sometimes I will just use my hands. Other times I will use a brayer. That's probably your best use, but I lent it to someone. So I'm just going to get this down with my hands really well before I send it through. That is going to make sure that it cuts where it's supposed to, that the fabric doesn't move, and that it cuts through. You can cut 2 mask shapes from one 12 by 12 mat. Just make sure you choose your material, whether it's cotton, fleece, or any other material, before placing it on your fabric mat and cutting. So when things go well and your mat is nice and clean and you've cut fabric, it should peel up really nicely, beautiful clean cut edges. Depending on the fabric that you're using and the thickness of it, sometimes a little bit will stick, so you get a little bit of fray, but otherwise you get a really perfect cut. So that is best case scenario. But you will notice there is some fuzz left on there, which you do need to take off. So I like to use baby wipes. And a little tip, always store your baby wipes upside down so that the one that you pull out first is going to have the most moisture on it. You know, gravity. If you store it this way, your moisture is going to go down here, so your driest wipes are on top. Great to know if you have a baby or if you use these for crafting. So once it gets enough lint like that on it, I will take it and just rub over it with a baby wipe, and you'll see that it is picking up that lint. And then once it dries again, it's going to be nice and sticky for your next cut. See all that lint coming up? And this one isn't terribly bad, but I want to show you what happened to another one that I let go even a little bit longer. And you definitely notice the lint a lot more when you're using a dark color than when you're using a light color, but it doesn't mean it's not there if you're using a light color. So here's a perfect example. I had been cutting cream face masks on this one, and then I did black, and then near disaster struck. I went to pull it up, and there were sections that didn't cut, which all is not lost. I can just pull it up and then use my scissors to get that shape out. I can still totally use that to make a sleep mask, but this isn't what we want when we're using the Cricut to cut. We don't want to then have to cut it ourselves as well. And that happened just because this one had way too much lint on it. So it definitely needs to be cleaned with a baby wipe as well. Now, another thing I wanted to show you was once I am done with a cut, normally I do my squares a little bit big. So I will just take them. I'll just take the excess. And if there's a big strip like that, I will just make however wide that will go into a strip, because I'm sure I will need fabric strips for another project down the road. And I do the same thing, oops, with the fusible fleece. This is just extra from when I cut this pile of fusible fleece. So I do love using the Cricut Maker to cut out things like this, especially that have so much shape to them. My hand just gets tired cutting, pinning it on, cutting it out, pinning it on, cutting it out. You can get a lot done in a little bit of time as long as you invest in multiple mats to save you time. You can do it all with one, but then you have to be cleaning it, wait for it to dry so that it's sticky again to do your next one. And you also have to wait to load, unload. So if you have at least two, you're going to get your project done a lot faster, especially if you're mass producing things. So I took the fusible fleece and I ironed it onto the back, all of these cream sides, so that I can just whip up a bunch of sleep masks. And then I'm going to put some sayings on some using heat transfer vinyl. But first, let me show you how you sew this together. So you have your 14-inch piece of elastic, and you're going to just hook it on either side, on the right side of your fabric. I'm just going to get that right in the center. And then if you want to, you can fold this like this and pin it, or I usually just leave it like that. And then with right sides together, there's not really right side to black. So you're making a sandwich. I'm just going to hold that and I'm going to clip that in there too. So we have the fleece attached to the cream fabric, then the elastic in here, and then this on top. And I'm going to clip all the way around, and you're just going to sew around this with a 1/4 inch seam. And I like to do 2 small ones to remind me to stop, because you want to leave a few inches of this top straight edge open for turning it right side out after you have this sewn together. All right, so we're going to do that. And then you can just set up a few of them and take them to the sewing machine and get sewing all at once. Now I'm going to sew around the sleep mask with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, leaving a few inches on that top straight edge open for turning. And I like to go back and forth a little bit at each end, just to make sure you're not going to pull your stitches out while you're flipping this right side out. And then also where these 2 sides are, where the elastic is, we're going to go over that a few times as well, just to reinforce and so that that doesn't get pulled loose when somebody is using their sleep mask later. This is my least favorite part of sewing anything with curves, but it's really important so that when you turn it and press it, that your finished sleep mask will have a nice curve to it, because the fabric is able to move on the inside. All right, and then if anything looks a little bit thick, you might want to trim that down a little bit just so that there's less bulk when you flip it. And I always do that after I clip the curves, just to make sure it's a little bit easier to clip those curves when you have a little bit more distance between the edge of the fabric and the stitch line. All right, we'll get that mess off of there. All right, now we're going to turn it right side out. And just be gentle so that you don't strain and rip the edges where it's sewn together. And you just kind of rubbing this part along the edge just to help it get that shape correct. All right, so now you're going to take it to the ironing board and you're going to press it, and you're going to press it with your opening folded under so that no one will know where it is. Now the final step in sewing the sleep mask is to top stitch. And since I have basically white on one side and black on the other, I'm going to use a white top thread and a black bottom and stitch from this side just because it's easier to change my bobbin thread than re-threading the entire top part. And then I'm just going to, I'll start over here, and I'm going to go at about 1/8 of an inch from the edge because we want to make sure we catch that folded under, this part that we folded under that is open. We want to make sure that gets closed when we are doing our top stitching. Now that I sewed together a group of sleep masks, I did black on one side, white on the other. It gives me lots of flexibility for decorating and also is going to be really good at keeping all the light out while you slumber. So the next thing you need to do, if you so choose, is make them more interesting by using some of the cut file designs that came with this bundle. So first I'm going to do a really simple one that many people are going to want. Go ask your dad. Now I made these pretty big. You could make them smaller so they don't take up quite so much of the face mask if you prefer. I basically put them on top of the template for the shape of the sleep mask and tried to make it smaller, assuming there was going to, be your seam allowance if you sewed yours together. Or if you purchase them, just make sure you measure and then make this whatever size you want. But I wanted this to have big impact so that any child seeing someone with the sleep mask on would not wake them to ask them a question, but would go ask their father. So I'm just taking the mini heat press on medium. I looked it up on the heat guide for the type of vinyl that I'm using. Press that over, and I'm using a matte vinyl. I really like it. So that just looks great. So now let's try another one that is going to have 2 colors. Always line it up before you press anything. So line everything up, and you're going to notice this was designed to have the in progress kind of go around the Y. But then the eyelashes aren't quite lined up properly. I thought I did a better job of that when I cut it, but it really doesn't matter because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these eyelashes off. And I also combined 2 different designs. The Beauty Rest in Progress could just be by itself and centered like that. Or you could also add the eyelashes, but you want to make sure they're in the spot that you want them. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press the pink, the Beauty Rest, and I can just press right on this protective, on this plastic. I don't need to add parchment paper or Teflon because the plastic that comes with the vinyl is perfectly fine to use with your heat press. This pink's kind of cool. It gets a little bit darker, so I can tell that it is on there nicely and ready to roll. Now I'm going to lay out the black pieces. And you do want to make sure you don't touch your elastic with the heat press because you do not want to melt it. All right, so now that I have those where I want them, I will cover this with a piece of Teflon sheet, because if the press touches the pink where there's no plastic over it, that would be bad. So you can cover it like this, or hold on, just had another idea. I can take the piece that I just pulled off and use that to protect. Yeah, let's just try that. I've never done that before, but I think that should work. All right, so now I'm just going to do the same thing over the black. And you can use a bigger heat press if you prefer, but for these projects, they're kind of small. This mini is just super easy and fast to heat up. And so there is a 2-colored design. A few others. I did the pink on top of the black. Looks very cool. This is another one where I combined the eyelashes with one of the words. You could also combine the eyelashes with kids' names. Great for slumber parties, bachelorette parties, girls' trip, girls' weekend. So many ways to use sleep masks. In today's episode, I'm going to share one of my newest obsessions, mug rugs. They're like coasters, but bigger. Great way to use your fabric scraps. Also fantastic to use the small designs across the top of the panel from my new collection, Happy at Home from Riley Blake Designs. Let's talk about what you need to make a mug rug. You can make them simple, you can make them more complicated. We're just gonna get a couple done. And mug rugs vary in size. Basically, it's an oversized coaster that you can put a mug and maybe a cookie or a little plate or biscotti or whatever you want on there. So don't fret too much about the exact dimensions of this. We're going to do this as a quilt as you go project, which means we're going to quilt as we go. So instead of putting all our pieces together and then quilting, we're going to quilt one piece at a time, and I'll show you what that means. So to do quilting as we go, we need a base, and I'm going to show you 3 different options. The first option is you can use scraps of regular just quilt batting. But to use batting, it needs a little bit more stability to quilt right on it. So you're going to use a backer fabric as well. And muslin works great. It's thin, but it will work. You're just gonna place that right on top. And then you will put your piece on top of that. So we would put that there, we do our quilting, then we add our next piece. So that's one option. Another option is to use muslin and a fusible fleece. One of the reasons I say to use muslin is it's not going to add a lot of bulk to your project. You can also use white fabric, white scraps, or a solid. The thing you want to remember about using scraps for your kind of temporary base that's going to be on the inside of your mug rug is you want to make sure it is not going to show through. Say you had a scrap like this and you were doing something lighter on the back, that's going to show through. So that's what you need to pay attention to. And then I also tried using a scrap of flexi foam. This one is with fusible fleece. This one is with flexi foam. You can see it gives a different look. You can really see that quilting even more distinctly on that, and it feels different. I know you can't feel it on the video, but I'm feeling it for you. It just depends the look you want. I will say doing the flexi foam was a lot harder to get it turned under to top stitch so that you can really tell that I did it at the top. I should have done it at the bottom or the side. Didn't realize. Next time I do a foam one, I will bind it instead of doing this non-binding method. But today I just want to show you how to whip these up quickly without having to do binding. All right, let's get started. I've cut the muslin and the batting to 11 inches by 7.5 inches. You always want the quilt as you go part to be bigger so that we can trim it down to size before we sew it together and make the mug rug with no binding. That's the easiest way to do it. So then you're going to place your first design on top of the batting and the muslin. Because I'm going to do really simple quilting on this as well. I'm going to do straight lines, and I'm going to use my favorite thing, painter's tape. This is 1-inch painter's tape, and I think it works great for mug rugs. So I'm just going to cut a piece or rip a piece that will go diagonal from corner to corner. And you can do either direction. I'm going to go this direction. Now you don't want to press it down on the batting because it'll really stick on the batting and then it's a mess to pick up. But we're just going to use this as a guide. I'm going to sew down either side, and I'm just going to keep moving the tape, and I'm going to get perfectly parallel lines, super fast, super easy. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're just going to take a sewing machine, and we're going to sew all that quilting. And you don't need to worry about knotting when you start and stop your quilting because the edges are all going to be trimmed a little bit in the end, so you can just start and go for it. Once you sew on both sides of the tape, your initial time, you're just going to keep lifting the tape off of your mug rug and then lining it up on the other side of one of those stitch lines and then stitching to the side that doesn't have any stitching. The main thing to remember is do not stitch through your tape or it will be a mess to pick up and move for the next one. All right, so we have our Let's Stay Home square quilted on there. And this is our plan. We're gonna have the blue dot over here, and then we're gonna have the birds from the selvage right there. So the next step is going to be to sew this blue on here. So we're just going to flip it and we're going to line up the edge of the blue and the edge of that square. And you'll notice I'm not worried about how long this is. It's longer than the rest of it because it's all getting trimmed at the end. Sewing this one on and then we will flip and press that. So next we're going to add our birds. So I am going to trim this a little bit just because it is kind of long. And then I need to decide how much of this brown I want showing. I'm going to put this raw edge slightly
over this seam because I don't want this seam to show. I want it to look like we have pieced these three things together. So it's going to be just over that seam, and I'm going to sew down there with a 1/4 inch. All right, that's going to look good. Let me go quick press that. I forgot to do the quilting on the dots, so I'm just going to fold that back down. No worries, see? This is one thing I love about these. It's just kind of a free-for-all of whatever you decide is fun. So I'm going to do lines so they'll be horizontal. So I'll have just some different variety of lines on this mug rug. So I'm going to take this piece of tape again. I'm going to just shorten it, and I'm going to center that. I'm going to sew on either side. And I moved this back so that I can knot in here and we won't see where this line ends. Now you don't want your tape to go too far over your fabric because you don't want it to stick onto your sewing machine while you're doing this quilting. Now we have that quilted. So now the last part is just deciding how I want to quilt this selvage on here. We're getting close. Now it is time to trim our quilted front and match it to the back. The back is already pre-cut to 7 inches by 10 inches, which is going to give us a 9.5 by 6.5 mug rug. I'm just going to line up these edges on the grid lines because it's really up here that really needs to be cut. And then I am going to trim and make this a nice little rectangle. So just keep lining everything up unless you're going to be using a rotating mat, which I'm obviously not at the moment, and get it all squared up. And then we're going to trim the back to fit the front because I think my front is going to end up being a little bit smaller. See how I'm lining this up along that straight edge as well. Now you're going to put right sides together, the front and the back, and well, you'll see we have this one. The size is a little bit different. So our mug rug is a little bit long. So I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to trim the backing so that our front and back are the same size. I've sewn around the 3 sides and now we need to clip the corner. So here's what I recommend for clipping corners. Instead of just clipping straight across like that, making a triangle, come down the sides and come up to that point. Do not clip your stitching, very important. But this is going to take a lot more of the bulk out of that corner and it's going to make it easier to turn and get a nice corner for there. Now we've left this edge completely open. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn this right side out. I always use my fingers to get those corners out as best I can to begin with. And then grab my cute little bird, Riley Blake turner, to get that corner turned out even better. You want to do it gently because if you go with too much force, sometimes the blue point comes out and you have pushed through your stitching. If that happens, you can just turn it back the other way and re-sew that, but it's preferable not to do that. Okay, so I got those corners out. Now I'm going to go press it and I'm going to fold this end under on both sides and then we're going to come back and we're going to top stitch. Now we're going to top stitch all the way around, which is going to give us a nice finish on the outside and it is going to close the open section and nobody will know where it was.
So what do you think? Are you sold on mug rugs? Have you ever tried them before? They're great for gifts, teacher appreciation, Secret Santa for your neighbors, for coworkers. These would be a wonderful thing to sew and sell at craft fairs. I'd love to know what you think of this and how you might use this project in your sewing life. Leave me a comment and let me know. In today's tutorial, it's all about kids and it's all about the coloring. Or if you like to color, you go for it. Make one of these for yourself. There should be no age limit on these. I apologize. With a 1/4 yard of fabric, you can make 2 of these holders that holds a 3x5 little notepad that you can find pretty much anywhere and 6 crayons. Or you can make a really long one that holds 16 crayons and the notepad if you use the entire 1/4 yard for one project. So I'm going to walk you through how to do these little ones. And then if you want to make it bigger, you're just going to double it up and have a lot of fun. Let's get started with our materials. This is a pretty simple project, so you don't need very much. Once we have this all sewn together, you're going to need a memo book. I use these 3x5 inches and then some crayons, but we can set those aside for now. You're going to need fabric, rotary cutter, pins or clips, 2-inch piece of hook and loop, also known as a Velcro, a piece of fabric that is 5.5 by 1.5 to make our closure tab, And then my favorite, heat erasable pen for marking those lines. You can also use a chalk marker or a pencil, totally your choice, but I like how easy these are to see when you draw on the fabric. And that is going to come off with heat. So once you hit the iron to that, it is completely gone. No one will ever know it was there. And then also I like to use a little square ruler. You can use any kind of ruler that you have, but I like to use this one to do my markings. It's a great size, and I will show you that in a little bit. Now this is a 1/4 yard of fabrics. I cut it the full width of fabric, then I cut the selvage off one end and I cut it in half. This way we can make 2 of these little crayon carriers out of 1/4 yard of fabric, making it a really economical thing to use if you're making multiple. Because this is a tutorial for the easiest way to do this, you definitely want to use a solid, just a random print like dots or things like stripes, things like that, or something that's not going to look super directional. And here is why. This would be so cute for a little crayon thing, right? When you sew it together, this is going to be the outside, and then we're going to fold this up to put all the crayons and everything, and the inside is going to be completely upside down. This is possible, but that's going to be a whole nother thing. And the first step is to just take this fabric and fold it the long way, right sides together, and then you can either clip or pin these 2 sides, and then we're going to do the same thing with this little closure. So we're just going to fold that in half, and we're going to sew down these 2 sides. And this one, I'm just going to finger press, which basically means push it with your fingers. And I'm just going to put 1 pin in that. Now we're going to go sew these together. I'm just going to sew down each side with a 1/4 inch seam. The next step is to turn both of these right side out. Now I want to cut off a teeny bit of the fabric right there, but make sure you do not cut your stitching. So it's kind of like cutting a corner, but you're only cutting one part because we did a fold instead of stitching that other side. And this one, because it's big, really easy to turn right side out. We're going to grab the ironing board in a minute. This one, because it's so skinny, this is 1 inch in between the stitching. It is a bit harder to turn right side out, but I'm going to show you my tip. So the first thing is you want to turn it so that the seam is folded down, right? You don't want to put too much strain on that seam. And then you can just see what you can do with your fingers. But I also like to grab tweezers. And so I will put the tweezers as far in there as I can. I got it. See how it's pinched in there? Now I'm going to keep that pinched, and I'm just going to pull that out like that. Okay, now we have to get the corners out. So I'm going to use this handy dandy tool, turning tool in a cute little Riley Blake bird. And the key is just to kind of run it along the seam and be really gentle at those corners because you don't want to push through the fabric. Now, if you don't have something like this, you can use other tools. So you could use a pen as long as you don't have it open because you don't want to be drawing on the inside of your fabric. If you're really careful, you can also use this pointy tip from the cleaning brush that came with your sewing machine. But you have to be really, really gentle because it's quite pointy and it's going to be pretty easy to poke through that fabric, but that does work. You can also use a chopstick, basically anything with a little bit of a point can be used to push it out, but you just want to be gentle. But look at what great points we have on that. Next step involves a little bit of ironing. You're going to push these seams out. We want to have it nice and flat and the seams to be on the edge. And then this is just a fold, but we do want to press that. So everything is nice and flat. The next step, we're going to press this raw edge under about 3/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. This is one of those beautiful projects. If you do a 1/2 inch, you're going to be totally fine. So once we get that finger pressed, we're just going to take the iron and press that closed. Now we're going to press this one as well. We don't have to fold this end under because it is going to get tucked in here. So yay for that. We just have to make sure it's nice and flat and even. So while we have the iron on, we're going to press this up, which is going to be the start of making our pockets. And we are going to fold it up 2 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do, and don't iron on your quilting rulers, but it's great to do this. I'm going to put my ruler up here, and then I'm just going to fold this up and see what happens. Well, that's too far. So I'm going to line this edge up with 2 3/4, and then I'm just going to push the ruler until I can feel that the ruler is at this fold. Take my ruler out, and as long as these sides are straight, you're going to have a nice consistent 2 3/4 inches all the way across. So I'm just going to press this in place. Now we're going to take our hook and loop. So we have the scratchy side, which is the hook, and the soft side, which is the loop. And they, as you know, stick together very nicely, and kids can do it. So the soft side is going to go on the back of the crayon container, and the scratchy / hook side is going to go on our tab. And the reason for that, let me show you the one that's done, is that if someone has this laying on their lap, you don't want the scratchy part of the Velcro on their lap, because if they're wearing something knit, that could attach and mess up their clothes. So really important to put the soft side on the back and the scratchy side over here, because that's always going to be face up when they are using this pack. It's the little things, right? So I'm just going to head over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this onto the tab. And then I will be right back and show you how to figure out exactly where that goes on the back of this fabric. You want to use a pretty small stitch length. I'm going to be using a 1.8 because this is a small piece and we're just going to be going around it in a box. You also want to make sure you pull up your bobbin thread, because the front of the closure tab is where the bobbin thread is going to be. So if you skip this step and end up with one of those little bird nests at the beginning of your stitching, it is going to show. So let me remind you how to do that. You're going to put it pretty close to the folded edge, because this raw edge is going to go inside the crayon pack. So I'm just going to put a clip right here just to keep it in place. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, let's do it. So you're going to hold your top thread. You're going to put your presser foot down. You're going to lower your needle, still holding this thread, lift your needle, give it a little tug, and grab that bobbin thread. This is going to stop it from getting sucked under when you get started. So then you're going to put both of these threads under the foot, and you're going to hold them tight while you start. So do like 2 to 3 stitches, keep holding them, and then do 2 to 3 backwards. So that locks those in place. Now these should not get sucked under anymore, so you can let that go. And now we are just going to sew all the way around this loop to attach it to the closure. And you can see we didn't have a big old bird's nest back there. Just need to cut that off. Now, if you didn't want this to show, you could just match your bobbin thread to the main color of your fabric. I'm going to show you how to get the soft side on the back of the crayon pad. The next step is to decide where our closure goes, and then make sure that the loop gets lined up properly on the back of the case. But before we do that, I want to show you one other thing that I forgot to mention when I just folded that up and ironed it. This is the open end, and this is folded, so the closure is going to go here because it gets tucked in. That means that this notepad is going to go on the left. And that is because it's going to roll up nicely and close when the notepad is on the opposite side of the closure. This is the one that I did that way. So you just flip, flip, perfect, right? This was the second one I did. This was the first one I did when I hadn't thought through that part, and I put the closure on the same side as the notepad. Well, if you flip, flip, that doesn't work. So you end up having to like do this really weird flip. Yeah, it's just not good. So the closure is always the opposite side of the notepad. Now, being a right-handed daughter of 2 left-handed parents, I want to tell you how to do it the opposite way. If you want this to be on the right, all you do is you put your opening on the left and you would fold it up in that direction. That way your closure's over here, your notepad's over here. So now you know how to do it both directions. We're gonna stick with what I already did. Find the center, and you can either measure with a ruler or you can just use your grid if you have it on your mat. So I'm going to fold this back and I'm just gonna place this in here, 2¼ inches. So we have like 2¼ on either side. Have it in about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to pin that in place. And I'm going to do it from both sides just so that it stays straight. Now we're going to turn it over. So this is the back, and you're going to measure 2¾ inches from this side. So I'm just going to put this ruler down, and you can draw a mark or you can just leave your ruler sitting on there. And that is what you're going to use to line up the edge of the loop. Now I'm going to keep that there, and just to make sure I have it lined up well, I'm going to fold this back, making sure this edge and this edge are lined up, and I'm going to very quickly realize, nope, it's too far up. So I'm just going to scooch it down so that that is all lined up, so that it's going to hit very nicely when you go to close. Hold that down, fold that back, pick this up, because the folded part is under there, or we could have just moved that back, but it's easier to see that way. Now I'm going to put a pin in here so I know exactly where I want this to be. And I do kind of put it to one side so I can start sewing here. And now I'm just going to go sew that on just like we sewed the other half on. We have our closure pinned. We have our loop on the back. So we're going to keep it where the hook is facing up. We're going to fold this back up. And the next step is to sew all the way down from here down to here. We're going to go across the bottom and up to here. You know what's no fun? When you forget to hit record. I forgot to hit record as I was sewing that, but thankfully it was something simple, so I think you can get it. So I started up here, and then I doubled back here, and I sewed all the way around, and then I went over the edge and back just to reinforce that edge. So now we can remove this pin. And some people ask, why do I sew on the bottom since it is a fold? Partly just to finish it and give it a little bit more stability, because I don't see the need to put any kind of interfacing in here because the notepad and the crayons keep it pretty solid, but this does help with that a little bit. And it also helps the crayons just kind of stay up a little bit, because you need this fold to be big enough to keep your notepad in place, but not so big that you can't see the crayons. So it can be a little bit of a quandary. Now it is time to do our markings. That means you need to make a decision. Do you want your notepad to be stored like this, where the whole notepad is in the pocket? Or do you want just this back cardboard to be in the pocket and the rest to be out so that it's just easy for the kids or whoever to flip through that? Totally personal preference. If you want it this way, you're going to have the cardboard in here, and then you're just going to take your ruler, go maybe 1/8 inch past the cardboard, and then you're going to just draw a line down the pocket so you know where to sew to make this pocket for the notepad. If you had made a different choice, you can see this stitch line wouldn't work. If you wanted it to be totally tucked in, you're going to want to sew 3.5 for a snug fit or 3 3/4 for an easier fit from the seam, not the edge, because if you go from the edge, it might be a little bit too tight to get your notepad in. So this is our first stitch line that we're going to do. Now we are going to make little pockets for the crayons, just like this. And for that, I want you to start from this edge, because sometimes there's not quite enough space in between the notepad to put an extra crayon, and you want to make sure if you have any extra weird amount of space, you want it near the notepad, not over here. I just turn it over, and again, you're going to start your marking from the seam line, not from the edge. And you're going to mark 1 inch. This is what 1 inch looks like. It's nice and roomy. If, you want to get more crayons in there and you want it to be a little bit more of a snug fit, you could do like 3/4 of an inch, but I like to do 1 inch myself. And then you're just going to draw 1 inch increments off of the previously drawn line, and see how easy it is to see these lines because they're made with this pen. Okay, so see, we have a weird amount. No crayons fitting in there, but we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here. So this is why you measure from this side for your notepad and this side for your crayons. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to remember to hit record, and I'm going to show you how we are going to finish putting these stitch lines, and then all that will be left is adding our notepad and our crayons. I put 2 pins just to make sure this stays nice and flat as I'm sewing these lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew in U shapes just to save time. If you want to, you can start and stop on each individual line, but I'm going to start up here, go down. I'm going to go right along that same stitch line and then go back up. So then I'm only starting and stopping a few times. And each time you start, you definitely want to pull up that bobbin thread because your bobbin is going to be on the outside of this project. And you're going to want to go beyond the fold, just like 2 stitches, just again, to reinforce it when people are putting crayons in and out. Now you'll notice I'm about to sew up onto the loop a little bit, which is totally fine, but that's why we put that loop on before we sewed these channels. Now we need to get these lines off of the fabric. And all you need to do is heat up your iron. Look at that. I'm like a child. This amuses me every time. See, all that is left is to add our notebook and our crayons. So we had decided to have it go like that, and that's perfect size. Then you just roll it up and attach that Velcro, and it is ready to go. Hi, this is Tara Reed, back with another quick project. Today, I'm obsessed with key fobs, and I want to show you how quick and easy they are to make. They're great for using scraps as long as you have some of the hardware hanging around, and they're wonderful gifts. Stocking stuffers, teacher's gifts, hostess gifts, just because you felt like making them and don't want to have 50 in your house gifts. So let me show you how you can make these in 5 to 10 minutes. No joke. So here are the 3 common sizes that are created for key fobs. The first 2 are wristlets. This one is about 14 inches long. It's going to be a lot easier to put onto your wrist. Easy on, easy off. This is by far the most popular, which is a 10 inch. You can still get it on. It's not going to be as easy if you have larger hands, but it's also not going to take up as much room in your purse. And then this one is called a zipper pull, or it could just be a small keychain that takes up even less room wherever you're carrying your keys. Or you can also hook this to like a suitcase and have an easy way to see which luggage is yours. So now let's take a look at how easy it is to make. So what do you need to make these key fobs? If you want to have a different fabric on the inside and the outside to give it a little more character, you need 2 pieces of fabric and 1 piece of fusible fleece. And the dimensions will be on my blog at tarareed.com for the 3 different sizes that I showed you. If you want it to sew up even faster, you're going to use 1 piece of fabric so the outside and the inside will match, and again 1 piece of fusible fleece. Then you need the key fob hardware, which is basically this, and it has teeth on one side. You're going to clamp that together with a key fob tool. It has the rubber. It's the perfect width for this piece. So while some people use needle nose pliers and then put fabric around it so it doesn't dent your hardware, most of these are sold in kits with this tool. So if you're going to make a few of these, I highly recommend you just go for it and get the tool, because you're going to get easier and better results, and they're not that expensive. The first thing you're going to do if you're using 2 different fabrics is you're going to sew the 2 pieces together along a long edge with a 1/4 inch seam, and then press that seam open. You'll then take your fusible fleece, which is the same length as your key fob but not the same width, and center it over that seam, and then follow the manufacturer's instructions to adhere that fleece in place. I'm gonna move that aside. Now, if we're using just one, where the inside and the outside are gonna be the same, you skip a step. You don't have to sew anything or open any seams. You're simply going to layer the fleece and the fabric and adhere that fleece. Now, the next step is going to be the same for both. You're just going to simply fold your fabric right up against the fleece and press. You're going to do that on both sides. And we'll do that on the small one. I'm showing you the kind of the zipper pull size for the one fabric, and then the 10-inch, the medium, more popular size for the other one. All right, doing both at the same time, giving that time to cool off before I have to touch it again. Now you're going to fold this in half, which is basically folding it on the seam, and press. And because it is so thick, when you press it, it is pressing that seam, but it doesn't keep it down. So you can clip it or pin it, or you can simply take it to your sewing machine. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around and then down the middle. So for the one fabric, you're simply going to fold it in half. There's no seam to be folding it. You're just going to match the outside edges and press that in place. Back from the sewing machine. This is so simple, I decided you did not need to actually watch me at the sewing machine. So I took the pressed piece that was folded over and I just sewed around the edges, and then I did another row down the middle. Just keeps it a little bit more secure. And you can play with your thread colors. This one I did white, so it really shows. On the other side I did blue, so you're really not seeing your stitching. So you can decide if you want your stitching to be an accent. You could do a fun design down the middle or anything depending on what fabric you use. So you start that way, and you'll notice that the edges are a little bit scruffy. So this one I've done the next step, which is to just fold it in half and sew the end. Now, I did trim that so that it's going to be nice and tight against our hardware, and you're not going to have threads hanging out the side. So it's literally just fold it in half, sew across there. You need to sew across there because with this hardware, there's only a clip that digs into the fabric on one side. So you wouldn't want the other side of the fabric to somehow slip if you didn't clamp that tight enough. So now, move that so it's not in the way. You're just going to place that inside the hook, or the fob hardware, whatever you want to call it. And don't really push down too hard. You don't want one of those hooks coming into your thumb, but you'll see it's the exact width of your fabric. And then after some trial and error, this is the best way I have found to do this. So I come in from the side and I squeeze it closed slightly. Then I come in from the end, and you'll see that the tool is the perfect size to close this fob. It's designed, and this is a 1-inch fob. You want to make sure that your key ring is not hooked under that. And then you're simply going to give it a little muscle, squeeze it a few times, check both sides, make sure that it looks nice and clamped, and it's done. That's it. Completely done, super fast. So if you enjoyed this tutorial and key fob mania hits you like it has obviously hit me, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more tips and quick tutorials, as well as follow my blog. It has all of this and more at tarareed.com, or on social media. I'm on Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook regularly.
Ready for a quick project that'll get that fabric stash down? We're going to make coasters today. My name is Tara Reed. I'm an artist and a fabric designer with Riley Blake, and I am going to show you how quickly these little coasters sew up from 5 squares of fabric and a little bit of fleece. Let's get started. Making these coasters is so easy, and the first step is to iron a few things. So these are going to be the 4 prints. We're going to use the burgundy one twice that will be on the front. So here's an idea of 1, 2, 3, 4. This one used the cream twice, and then one fabric on the back. So the brown is going to be the back. So we're going to fuse the fleece onto there. It's 1/4 inch shorter on each side. You want to make sure the gritty part, which is the fusible material, is on the wrong side of your back fabric. And then you're just going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. I'm using a Pellon fusible fleece, so no steam, just press down for about 10 seconds. So we have that attached. We're going to set that aside. Now we're going to take each of these prints that will be on the front, that'll be kind of woven together, and I'm just spraying it, misting it with water instead of using a steam setting on my iron. Now we have our 4 pieces. We're going to turn the back right side up and put it down on your workspace. And then I'm going to use this again just to show you. Now, if you're using 2 prints, because I'm using 3 prints from one of my collections, this is a September leaf toss from my monthly placemat panels from Riley Lake Design. So I'm using 2 of them twice instead of using 4 different prints, because that's what I want to do. So if you're using 2 that are the same, you want to use them alternately. So the first one you put down and the third one, or the second and the fourth one. So when you're placing these on top of the coast of the backing, you want to make sure your raw edges are on the outside. The folded edge is going towards the center. So you're just going to line them up around the square. And so you'll notice I have the same print matching, so it's going to be this corner and this corner. Now, when you go to put your 4th one, you're going to take the first one and you're going to fold it down. And then you're going to place the 4th one and then fold this back up. And that is how you get it to weave together so that you're seeing one quadrant for each of the 4. Now I'm going to grab some fabric clips and I'm just going to clip this whole thing together. And I like to clip right at where they all come together on these 4 sides. And then if you want to, you could clip kind of where you turn, but I find that this works really well. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all the way around, and there is no need to leave an opening for turning because we're going to turn through these folds. So, fun fact, I thought I videotaped the sewing and the clipping and explaining of all this, but I took one photograph. Anyway, you can see that I sewed all the way around the coaster with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I clipped the corners. Now, what I wanted to tell you, and thought I told you, was instead of clipping just straight at the corner, clip twice so that you're removing a bit more of that fabric, because these corners are going to have a bit in them anyway between the folded over fabric, 2 layers, the backing, and a little bit of the fleece. So you want to clip that really well. Now, to turn it right side out, you simply put your fingers, get this open to the fold to grab at the back. Using your fingers, you're going to turn this right side out and get those corners pushed out as much as possible. And then if you need to, just grab like a turning tool, and then you can kind of push those corners out even better. Just do it slowly and gently because you don't want to push so hard that you push through the fabric and ruin your corner. Now, another thing, if you're going to use a turning tool, is make sure you also put that through all of the layers so that you're going against that fleece and not kind of in between 2 layers, because you're not going to get all the pieces of that corner. And that's it. Now I'm just going to press it so that it's nice and smooth. Some people will stitch all the way around again, but I just like the look of it where it looks like it's just fabric woven together. Simple, simple coasters, great for all the seasons, a fun little addition to your holiday table. It's traveling season, and if you are like me and so many other people that I know, you might have a fluorescent neoprene handle to help you try and find your suitcase in the sea of suitcases. Not the most attractive, so let's make something cute in just a few minutes out of fabric that we love. Another reason I love this, because it is made out of a square. When you're cutting it, you don't have to pay attention to what direction you're cutting. So if one side's longer than the other, you do have to pay attention to which direction your fabric is going, unless it's non-directional, of course. But this way, you just make your square and then you figure it out later. Here is what you need. 2 pieces of fabric, 5x5, a 5x5 scrap of batting. It could be fusible fleece, it could be quilt batting, whatever you have, and then a 4-inch piece of Velcro. Then I'm also going to use this cute little bird to turn the corners, but that's later. So all we do is we put these right sides together, and if it is directional, make sure you put them in the same direction. And then you're going to put the fleece on top. Now you're going to take this to your sewing machine, you're going to sew all 3 edges and leave an opening here. Now that I have that sewn together, I'm going to clip the corners, making sure not to get the stitching. And then this part is optional, but it does make it a little bit easier. I'm going to put a ruler right below the stitching so that when I do a chalk line, it goes right in line with the stitching. See how that looks like it's the same line? Then I'm going to very carefully take my scissors and just trim out this fleece. It's going to make it a lot easier when we fold it to get that open part folded over correctly without having to fold the fleece as well. Now we're going to turn it right side out. All right, I like to get my corners pushed out as well as I can with my fingers. Then I will use a turning tool. Super cute little Riley Blake bird, love it. And then just very gently push at those corners. If you go too hard or too fast, you might find your turning tool comes through and then you're going to be very sad. Now I'm going to take this to the ironing board and I'm just going to have this folded under, and it's really easy to figure out where to go because I just go right along that fleece. And I'm going to press that, and then I'm going to sew all the way around with about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. That will close this opening. So I can decide, do I want this to be the top? Do I want it to be this way, or do I want it to be this way? I mean, it doesn't really matter. Some people will look at it from this direction, but I usually like it to go the direction of like my suitcase. I kind of like that side better. So if I want this to be the top, then I'm going to put the scratchy side here, aka the hooks on this side, and then I'm going to put the loops on this side. So I'm going to go back to the sewing machine, hooks, loops, just like this. Hooks on one side, loops on the other side, so that when you fold them over, they meet and they stay on your suitcase. That's it, it's done. We have the hooks on one side, the loops on the other. So we'll just show you again how I put it on. I'm going to center it, I'm going to put the loops under. Then I'm just going to roll the fabric so that the hook connects and it is on there nice and secure. This would be a great stocking stuffer or gift for anyone who travels, for college students, basically anyone who ever uses a suitcase. This is super quick and easy to make. It's also, because it's so fast and easy and a great scrap buster, a great idea if you're looking for things that you can sew and sell. Happy travels!
If you are ready to up your dog's fashion game for their next walk, let's make them a super cute dog poop bag holder with simple items you should have in your stash or can get at the Dollar Tree. And if you love sewing for dogs, you can also make it to match their leash, which, surprise, surprise, I have a sewing tutorial for that too, so look for the link. Let's get started. Let's look at a finished product. So this dog poop bag holder is made out of fabric. It does use a buttonhole. That's the most complicated part of it, but otherwise I wanted to use tools and materials that most beginning sewers will have around the house. So you're going to use a buttonhole, you're going to use a little bit of Velcro, you're going to create this loop, and then this is a carabiner clip, which I got at the Dollar Tree. Originally, they had the little ones that had 4. This time when I went back, they only had the big ones. So you can get 2 for $1.25 or 4 for $1.25, depending on what they have in stock at the time. And then they also sell the waist bags, 4 for $1.25. Such a deal. This would make this project a great thing to sew and sell if you're looking to earn a little extra money or a wonderful stocking stuffer or gift for your dog owning friends. So let's look at what we need. You're going to need a seam ripper or scissors to open your buttonhole, a little piece of Velcro. I just took this regular hook and loop and I just cut the piece and then I cut it in half. Then we're going to have a 2x3 piece of fabric to make our loop. And then this is 5 inches
by 13 inches to make the actual bag. So the first thing we're going to do is you're just going to fold this in half, right sides together, and you're going to sew down both sides. Now, to get our loop created, we're going to turn it over and we're going to fold it in half and iron that. This is a cute little iron. How many irons do you have? I have a big iron, I have this little travel iron, and then I also use my little Cricut Mini sometimes to iron. Let me know in the comments how many you have going for all your sewing projects. But anyway, back to our project. We're going to open it back up, and you can see the crease that we made when we ironed that in half, and we're going to fold each of these raw edges into that crease, and you're going to iron on either side of it because we want to keep the original crease as well. Let me do the second side, and then we're going to fold that back, that a little press. Let's move. We have to sew that. We have to sew these next. Now for the tab, I'm just going to sew really close. So our tab is ready. And now I'm just going to turn this right side out. Now I'm going to take this to the ironing board. I'm going to press it flat, and I'm going to turn this edge under and press that as well. So I will be right back. So now we're going to top stitch near the edge to keep that side closed. Oh, this is so much better of an angle for you. Okay, so now we're going to take half of the hook and loop tape, doesn't matter which half, and I'm going to sew it centered on the fabric so there's about the same on either side. Now with hook and loop, you want to make sure they are on the opposite side of the fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this over, put it kind of there, and then I'm going to position the other half so that they're going to meet when these sides are even. So that's going to make sure our closure works really well. And then I'm going to sew that on next. Now you can do your hook and loop. You just want to make sure it's on the opposite side. So we did that. You can do it before or after your buttonhole because I just realized you're going to have to change your presser foot the same number of times. So now we're going to take this off and I'm going to put on my buttonhole foot. And I am using a Janome machine, which comes with this really cool automatic buttonholer. You put whatever button you're going to use, and even though we're not using a button, it makes the size perfect for me. And if you do have a Janome and don't know how to use this, then I do have another video about it. Let's talk about placing your buttonhole. So you're going to fold this in half, and you're just going to finger press because we just want to know where that middle spot is. And then it doesn't matter which side you draw on. And I'm a big fan of using what you have. I love those because when you iron it, it just disappears. You can also use a chalk line because once you sew your buttonhole, you're going to basically rip that part out. Or you can use a Sharpie, you can use a pencil, just whatever you have that you are going to be able to see. So I'm going to use the chalk so that you are going to be able to see it too, because I might be able to see the pink, but you are not going to be able to in the video. So you need at least an inch buttonhole, but because I'm using this automatic buttonhole, I'm going to measure how big the machine's going to make it. So it's going to make it 1.25 inches. So inch and 1.25 inches, totally up to you. So we're going to measure, and then I'm going to go 1.25 inches. Let's see. You just want to kind of center it. But you know, it is a dog poop bag holder. So if it's not perfect, it's okay. So once you have the buttonhole in your fabric, you can either use scissors, poke a little hole in the fabric and cut with the scissors. Just don't cut any of the stitching. Or you can use a seam ripper. This is my favorite, Cindy's seam ripper. She's the owner of Riley Blake Designs and designed this thing. You just are going to poke that in there or whatever seam ripper you use, and then just slowly push forward because you don't want to get overzealous and cut through any of your stitching. So you're just opening the fabric in between the stitching. So now our buttonhole is done. We have taken our loop and folded it in half, and we're going to match the raw edges to the edge of the bag holder lined up with the buttonhole. And then I'm just going to use a little fabric clip and clip that there. Now we're going to fold this to close the hook and loop and make sure we have the two ends lined up straight. Now we're going to shift this so that the loop is lined up with your clip so that it's going to be on the opposite side of the bag of the buttonhole. Now I'm going to put the clip through all the layers, which is quite a lot on that side. And then I'm going to put one down here as well. And now we're just going to sew straight across here and straight across here. And I'm going to double back where the fabric overlaps and where the loop is on this side just to reinforce it. Now, the moment of truth. We're just going to unhook that. I'm going to flip it right side out. And now, all we need is the bags, the carabiner clip, and we can hook it to the dog leash. So all you do is you grab your bags, open this up. You're going to pull the first one and put it through the buttonhole. Then tuck your roll of bags in there and close that Velcro back up. Then you're going to grab your carabiner, whether it's the bigger one or this one. Get your loop on there. And then I'm going to put it on, you might notice, this matching dog leash. You're just going to put that onto the handle so you're ready to walk in style and clean up any business that your dog might do.
Grab your fabric scraps because today we are going to make a scrappy dog leash that is made out of fabric scraps, 1-inch strips of fusible fleece, a clip, and an optional D-ring. Also optional is a quilter's clapper. I'm going to show you how and why I love to use that when we get to the ironing stage of this. But first, let's talk about our fabric. Non-directional or solid fabric, certainly the easiest to use. You just need anything that you can cut to 4 inches wide. And I also like to have a piece that is about 17.5 to 18 inches long in a darker fabric for the handle, because this piece is going to flip and become our handle. And I always like something dark because you're putting your hands on there, so you don't want your beautifully constructed leash to get dirty on the first time out. You can use lighter fabrics as well, but I usually like to keep them in the leash and also not on the part of the leash that might touch the dog. I apparently have rules about this. So I'm using some fabrics from my Spring Barn Quilts fabric line from Riley Blake. I'm mostly using non-directional. The windmill is a little bit directional, but doesn't matter as much. But I also want to show you how to use a directional fabric in a way that will work, that you'll be happy with if you really, really want to. So before we dive into sewing, I just want to show you how to use directional fabric if you want to on a dog leash. Now remember I told you we need pieces of fabric that are cut 4 inches wide, but only 2 inches of that is actually going to be showing on your leash. The other 2 inches are going to be folded and tucked inside to conceal the raw edges and give us a little bit more bulk. How you cut it and the pieces that you pick is going to impact how your leash is going to look in the end. So I'll keep that right there so you have it for reference. Now the first sample I want to show you is where I took a scrap. You'll notice the direction of the chickens is going this way. Not ideal, because here's what happens when you get it folded and pressed into the dog leash shape. We got lucky that these chickens look okay, but then you just have like these chicken feet. You half see a container, can't even tell what that is if you don't know the fabric. And over here, you got a couple chicken heads. Luckily, we didn't end up with a chicken with its head cut off on that. But in my opinion, directional fabric, you don't want it going this way to look cute on a dog leash. So this piece is what we're going to put on the leash that we're making today. And it's going to work really well because I chose very carefully where to cut these chickens out. So what you're going to do, if you're using something directional, is you're going to take your ruler, and you need a see-through ruler for this, and you're going to line it up to be 4 inches. And you want to make sure that whatever you want is within the center 2 inches, because these center 2 inches of fabric are going to be what shows on your dog leash. These 2 inches here and here, they are going to be inside, never to be seen again. When you're doing your fabric, you can kind of I kind of hold where the 4 inches is so I know, and just kind of move it around and decide what will work if you're working from a big piece, or do the same thing on your scraps. Moving on, get the rest of my scraps back. Let's talk about length. How long do you want this dog leash to be? The best way to decide how long you want it to be, if you have a dog and you're making it for your own dog, is to measure your favorite leash. If you take your leash, I'm going to use this one that I've already made, and you measure from the fold of the handle down to here. You don't need to measure the clip part because that's irrelevant to our fabric sewing. So you're going to measure down to here, measure that whole length, then measure how much it flips over, right? So for getting your hand in there, what size are you comfortable with? And then add about 2 to 3 inches for this part. And that is how long your perfect leash is going to be. Let's get started. We know we want this black piece to be first because we want this to be the handle. Remember, dark fabric, fold it over. And then I'm just going to add these different prints as I go. And I'm just going to do it at the sewing machine, but I'm just going to kind of show you how I'm going to do this here. Then I'm going to put a small white piece. Then I'm going to put the chickens because I want them pretty far up the leash. And then I'm just going to keep going. Black, red, white, black, red, white. I'm going to start with the long black because I want that to be my handle. And then I'm just going to sew these pieces together, right sides together. If I do have something directional, you want to make sure it's going in the right way. And we're just going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam and a pretty small stitch length since we're not going to be knotting at the front and back. So I usually use between a 1.8 and a 2.0. So as you can see, this isn't an exact science. I'm just kind of alternating the colors, so it's gonna have a pattern to it, but you don't even have to do that. Now we have this all sewn together and it is 90 inches long. So it's gonna be a nice length. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to press all of these seams open. If you were to press them to one side and then fold, you're gonna have a lot of bulk. So you're gonna have less bulk for this project if you press all of these seams open. I told you I'd tell you about this quilter's clapper. I like to just put that down after I iron. It absorbs some of the heat and also flattens that seam just a little bit more than you would get without doing it. Totally optional tool, but one that I am absolutely in love with and use all the time now. You'll spend the most of your time on this project ironing and second most sewing, obviously. Have you ever made your dog a leash? I have another tutorial where I show you how to use scraps of fabric and put it on top of nylon webbing. So it's a little bit of a different material. You're basically making a nylon leash that you're decorating with fabric on one side. So there'll be a link below the video to show you where you can find that. But this is just a different way to go, and it's fabric on both sides. This could be a fun gift for someone who has everything, but they also have a dog. You could make a set of dog leashes, maybe monthly dog leashes, one for each season, for holidays, things like that. Okay, we have all of these seams pressed open. Now, the next thing we need to press is we have to go the entire length and we're going to press this in half. Next, we're going to be adding our strips of fusible fleece. So we're going to open this up and I have a few 1-inch strips. This I bought off of a bolt. So it's 44 inches wide and I did a couple 1-inch strips. So what you're going to do is you're going to feel it to make sure you're putting the fusible part down. And it's a little bit gritty. Is how you can tell. This side is soft, that side's a little gritty because I'm feeling the fusible material. And then I'm just going to line it up with that crease that we just made, but I'm going to leave a 1/4 inch from the end because we're also going to be pressing both ends in like this, and we don't need the bulk of that pressed. We don't want to lose that crease that we just made. So what I do is I just place it down, and then I fold that, and then I press in sections to fuse that fleece. I'm gonna just open it back up, move it down, and continue the process all the way down. And when you're folding that over, you wanna make sure that fleece stays in the fold and doesn't like push forward. So just be gentle when you're folding that back over. Now we've gotten to the end of this piece of fleece. So I'm gonna take the next one and I'm just gonna butt it right up. You could overlap it a teeny bit, but if you keep it in place to iron, you're gonna be totally fine. It's gonna stay exactly where you need it to be. So if your fleece is longer than your leash, you wanna grab some scissors and cut that off about a 1/4 inch from the end. Now I'm gonna fold and press each end a 1/4 inch. All right, next step, we're going to take the side that is on the same half as the fleece, and we are going to fold that over, and we are going to press the length. But again, don't go all the way over because we don't want to lose that crease. So just stay on this side of that center crease. You could fuse the fleece and do this fold at the same time, but I find it to be more accurate when you do it as 2 separate steps. This is a very similar process, just a lot longer fabric as making key fobs or key wristlets. People call them different things. Have you ever tried that? I have a tutorial for how to make key wristlets as well, which uses the same kind of pressing and fleece and things like that. You're just going to finish it with key fob hardware to hold your keys instead of with a swivel hook to hold your dog. Now we're going down and we're doing the same thing on the other side. So we are basically, this side fleece has been added and we folded it in half. Now we are folding the other side in half, and then our final step will be to flip it and press it that one last time. Then we are back to the sewing machine. But first we gotta do 2 more quick runs down this entire leash. For our final run, I'm going to be using the bigger clapper. It's called a tailor's clapper versus a quilter's clapper because I want to clap as much length as I can at a time. And I'm going to be using clips. So we're going to be doing this final fold. You want to make sure any threads stay inside here. If they're in there, no one will ever see them again. If they're like hanging out over the edge, you'll have more trimming to do later. So we're just going to be folding this in half and pressing. Ideally, these 2 folds that we just did will line up. If they're a little bit off, no problem at all, because we're going to be sewing down both sides. Now for this step, because it's the last step, I'm going to be using the clapper just to really get those creases and that pressing nice and flat. And then I'm just going to put a clip to hold it together every 8 to 10 inches. So we're going to be doing that down the entire length, and then we're going to be ready to go back to the sewing machine. Now we have the entire length with fleece in there, folded, 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 and we are going to sew just all the way around the 4 sides, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, just to give it that stability and also to sew this part closed. So back to the sewing machine. And because this is really top stitching, I do use a longer stitch length so it doesn't take quite as long, because the 1.8 to 2.0 isn't necessary, so I usually use a 3. Now we just need to add the swivel hook, and I'm going to add a D-ring. That is totally optional. So first we're going to put the swivel hook on the end where you're going to attach it to your dog. So remember, I did the long black piece is going to be the handle, so I don't want to put the swivel hook on that side. I want to put it on this other end. So I'm just going to push the strap through the swivel hook, fold that in half, about 1.5 to 2 inches. You just want to have enough room that we can sew a rectangle with crosses in the middle just to make that nice and secure. Decided it was going to be easier to show you how to do the handle from my workspace than right at the sewing machine, because this is really important. So I've already sewn on the swivel hook, okay? So we want to make sure that we are going to loop the handle the same direction so that this doesn't look pretty on one side, but then the handle is the opposite side. So what I do is I hold it like this, and then I just pull the entire length through my hands and I flip like that, because now we know that it's going to be folded over on the same side of the leash. And you want to fold it over about 8 inches, which is almost exactly the length of the black. And then always just put your hand in there and decide if that, feels pretty good. You're going to lose about 1 inch as we sew that on. So I'm just going to do it the black to the black. And I am going to put this optional D-ring on here in case I want to hook, or whoever I give this to wants to hook anything on it. You might hook a little chapstick holder on there. This is another thing, and I have another tutorial for how to make the dog poop bag holder, and that can get clipped on there too. There'll be a link below the video to show you where to find the tutorial for this. So there's just different things. You might want to hook your keys on there, different things people might want to hook on there with their dog leash. So I like to add the D-ring. And I just leave it wherever because we're going to sew this to secure it first. And then we're going to move the D-ring down here. And then we're going to sew again just past it so that it holds it in place and it's not just flailing around your leash handle like it is right now. If you want to make a leash that is just one fabric, I made it with one piece of fabric. I did 2 cuts, 4 inches times width of fabric, and made the handle, flipped that over, and that was super, super quick to make. We have finished our scrappy dog leash, and here are the 3 different ways. The one that we just did, we just sewed straight. So you have straight strips of fabric in different directions, and you'll notice that these chickens look amazing because we knew just how to place them and fussy cut them. Not as amazing on the back side, but I think they look fantastic on the front. Or if you prefer this angled look, you're just going to put that together mitered, just like you would be making quilt binding. Or you can make it out of a single fabric. That's definitely faster and just a different look. So let me know in the comments which you prefer and which you think you might try. I would love to know how you're going to use these, who you're going to make them for, what style you like the best, but most importantly, have fun sewing and happy dog walking.
Let's get our dogs ready for the 4th of July or just looking like patriotic little pooches. Today I'm going to show you how easy it is to make a dog leash using nylon webbing and fabric scraps. And I'm going to be using the 3 different star patterns that go with my July placemat pattern that I designed for Riley Blake Designs. So first, let's look at really quickly what we need. 1-inch nylon webbing. I just got a big spool of it, but you can also buy this by the yard at most fabric stores. Thread, I usually match, I match the bobbin to the nylon, and then you can choose a different color top if you want, but I'm going to use red for both. Then this is optional, but highly, highly recommended. It's a bias tape maker. I got a set of 4. It comes in 4 different sizes, but we're going to use this one, the number 18, and that is going to make the perfect fold and iron for 1.5-inch strips of fabric. It saves you a lot of time, saves your fingers from a lot of steam. Then we're also going to be using ironing spray or starch, however you want to use it. Fabric, cutting mat, ruler, rotary cutter, and that's it. So first thing you need to decide is how long you want your leash to be. And if you have a dog, I would just measure your favorite leash and see how long that is and make it that long. Otherwise, a standard leash is about 6 feet long. A hiking or training leash, or for larger dogs, might be 10. An outdoor play, hiking, backyard, beach leash might be 15 feet. So totally up to you. We're going to go with 6 because I'm going to give this to my sister or my niece, and they have pretty small dogs, that they're just walking around the neighborhood. I'm going to start by measuring out 6 feet of this nylon. I'm going to make this a scrappy leash. You could do one fabric that goes the whole length of it, but I want it to look a little bit more fun, so I'm going to alternate between the 3 different fabrics. We're going to cut any scraps that we have to 1.5 inches wide. And the way we're going to sew these together is just like you would sew together binding, and I'll show you that when we get to the sewing machine. Be able to get a couple strips of this. Now, one thing I do recommend being careful of is if you're going to be using a light fabric like this white, I wouldn't put it on the handle because that's the part of your leash that's going to get the dirtiest and show dirt the most. So I would make sure you have a darker color up on the handle and right down at the bottom by your dog, and maybe put the white kind of towards the middle. So we'll play with that when we are piecing it together. But right now I'm just getting some different pieces. I'm just going to cut this into some random sizes, just making sure that I'm doing it pretty straight. So a smaller piece. All right, so some pretty short ones, longer one. I'm quite sure that all of these pieces together are definitely going to be longer than 6 feet. Now, because I don't have a dog leash on me, I'm going to make this loop to try and figure out just how long that's going to be, because I want to make sure when I'm putting this together, I have a long enough section of the darker colors before I go to white. So that looks pretty good. I'll just measure that. So at least like 14 inches. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and we're going to piece all of this together. And then I will show you how to use this cool thing and get this done. We're going to sew these strips together like we're making binding, even though it is thinner. And if you're not familiar, I'm going to show you what that means. So we're going to take one right side up, and then we're going to turn the other one upside down, so putting right sides together, and then we're going to make them into a right angle here so that this edge is lined up along that side and this edge is lined up along that side. Then we're going to twist it and we are going to sew at a diagonal. Now, if you're new to this, you're going to grab a ruler, and this is a chalk pencil, or you can use a fabric pen that will disappear in heat, and you're going to just draw that line so you know where to sew to make that edge. But once you do it a couple of times, you can just eyeball it. So once you do that, you'll see when you flip it like that, you get a nice angle, and then it becomes a straight line. And then what you do is you can do this with your rotary cutter. It's so small, I just do it with my scissors right at the sewing machine. Cut that to about a 1/4 inch. And now we're just going to add piece to piece to piece. First, I'm going to make sure, yep, this is more than 14 inches, so I'm going to add a white piece. So the piece that you started with, I always have that one face up, moving to the left of my machine. And then I take my new piece, and I put it face down, line those two edges up. And when you put white on top, you can actually see it, so it's even easier to do that diagonal without drawing it. But I'm just going to piece a bunch of these together. You can do 6 feet or more, because we can also use these to do dog collars, but that will be a different tutorial. You really can't measure it until it's sewn together, because if you were to just measure the individual pieces, you'll see you kind of lose part of about that much for every one that you put together. So just always make more than you need. Let's see what we got. Like 8.5 feet. So we'll be able to decide which portion of this we want on our dog leash when we get it all set together. Okay, let us talk about our goal with this. This is going to be the base of our leash, and then the fabric is going to have the raw edges folded under perfectly, and it's going to get sewn down like that. We're going to use this, but before we use this, I'm going to show you your other option, which is not nearly as much fun, and you would have to do it wider if you want to do it this way. So the other option is kind of how I do key fobs, where you're going to iron it in half, open it up, and then iron. So that would work, but to go 6 feet or more in that method, you're going to have very, very burnt fingers, and it's just tedious. So this is a great investment. Now what you do is you thread the fabric in here face down. So it kind of curves. See how it's curving with the curve of the metal? Like that. And then the set comes with this awl, little pointy thing I like to call it, to help push it through to get it out. And then you're going to get it flat so those two edges are matched, and you're just going to iron. Now you can do it just like that, but I like to spray it with a little bit of this firm finish ironing spray, because it helps it stay crisper and give it more shape for when we sew it onto the nylon. But I forgot one part first. Before we do that, we have to press these seams open where we joined everything together. Now, the spray stuff. Keep that away from heat, obviously. We're just going to shake it. Just follow the directions. There's all different kinds you could use. This is what I happen to have. I'm going to shake it, and you're just going to kind of spray, and you don't want to get it too wet. Guide that through there. I just do this, and then I just move the iron as I slowly pull back. Look at how fast that works. You don't want to go too fast, and you just want to make sure you're watching that those raw edges are kind of staying together so you get a consistent width to your final result. The trickiest parts are when you hit those seams. This part was starting to heat up a little bit, so I'm going to use the loop, which I think I'm supposed to use anyway, but We do what feels right, right? Can you imagine how long this would take if you had ironed it in half, opened it up, and then ironed each edge in? Whew. So now it's ready. I singed the end, basically melted the nylon at the very end by just using this lighter and putting it just super fast along the edge. See how that kind of melts it? If you go too long, I don't know that it'll catch fire, but I wouldn't recommend it. Just do a teeny bit and that just seals that so it's not going to fray. And now we are going to sew our fabric right on top of there. Then we'll add the clip. I'm going to put a little tag in the handle part and it'll be all done. So back to the sewing machine. If you wanted to, you could clip this all along to keep it straight, but I find it's pretty easy to just do it as you're feeding it into the machine. So I don't do that step. You do want to turn under this raw edge at the very top, and then when we cut it and do the bottom, so that that doesn't fray. So I'm just going to turn that under, and then I'm just going to sew 6 feet down one side, across, and 6 feet up the next side. So let's rock and roll. Okay, that took 5 minutes and 45 seconds to sew together. Now we're going to have this end, because it's got lots of dark, to be the handle. And the other end will have the hook. So for the handle, it's 7 inches folded. So I folded basically 7 inches down, 14 inches of it is the loop. Then if you have a little tag or anything you want to put in, I like to put it in here more because I do need to do a box to keep this nice and secure. And I like to go in X. All right, handle is done. Little tag is in there. We're going to get to our other end, and we're going to take our 1-inch swivel hook. That's what's going to hook onto the dog's collar. You're going to string that through and bring it out about 1.5 inches. So this is about 1.5 inches, so that you can then again do like a little box, maybe a little bit less, to make that nice and secure. You're done. You've basically decorated a nylon webbing leash with fabric, fun fabric strips that are going to alternate, and your pooch is going to be very patriotic.